Have you ever wondered what hides behind the warm smile of a grandmother, the gentle touch of a nurse, or the welcoming handshake of a neighbor? We grow up believing women are nurturers, caregivers, protectors, but history has a chilling way of proving otherwise. This isn't about Aileen Wuornos or the names you've heard 1,000 times in documentaries. No, today we're pulling back the curtain on a darkness most people never talk about. The women who turned the act of giving life into an art of taking it away. These are the most evil female serial killers you've never heard of. And trust me, you won't look at kindness the same way again. If you love deep true crime stories and want more dark secrets from history, make sure you stick with us till the end and hit that subscribe button, because what's coming next will shock you. Let's begin with a woman who earned the name Goey Mye, which translates to Good Mye, a name that sounds wholesome, comforting, almost saintly. But the truth behind it? Anything but. Maria Swanenburg was born in the Netherlands in the mid-1800s, a time when community ties were strong and trust was everything. She worked her way into the hearts of neighbors and relatives, always ready to lend a hand when sickness struck or when someone needed care. She was the woman you called on in times of vulnerability. But that trust was her weapon. Behind every spoon of soup, every comforting visit, Maria had a silent plan: arsenic. Her poison of choice, slipped into meals and medicine, easy to hide in an era when sudden illness was common and medical science couldn't always keep up. Over the years, bodies began piling up. Some say she killed for inheritance, others believe she relished the control, the quiet thrill of deciding who lived and who didn't. Official records confirmed 27 deaths, but whispers suggested over 100 victims might have fallen to her deadly kindness. Imagine the fear spreading through that Dutch town when authorities began exhuming bodies and finding the unmistakable signs of arsenic. It wasn't some monstrous stranger lurking in the shadows. It was Good Mye, the woman everyone trusted most. When she was finally arrested in 1885, the courtroom gasped as she calmly confessed to 3 murders while investigators linked her to dozens more. She escaped the death penalty but spent the rest of her life behind bars, dying in prison in 1915. And yet, even then, some believed the full truth died with her. From the quaint streets of the Netherlands, we move to Eastern Europe, to a woman whose name drips with Gothic horror, Vera Renczi. They called her the Black Widow, a title that captures only a fraction of her darkness. Born into privilege in Romania, Vera seemed destined for a life of elegance and refinement. But beneath the polished exterior burned a storm of obsession and jealousy so intense it turned lethal. She didn't just want love. She wanted control. Absolute, unchallenged devotion. When lovers strayed or attention faltered, Vera reached for her old friend arsenic, the same poison favored by many female killers for its subtlety. One by one, husbands and lovers vanished from her life, 35 by some accounts. And here's the macabre detail that haunts every retelling. She kept their remains. Preserved bodies arranged in coffins in her cellar. A grotesque gallery of devotion. Each corpse a silent testament to her need for eternal possession. Among them, her own son, killed when he threatened to expose her. Some dismissed the legend as exaggerated, a tale twisted by time and rumor. But whether all the details are true or not, her story strikes at something deep and unnerving. The idea that love, warped and twisted, can drive a person beyond every human boundary. And Vera? She didn't just cross the line. She erased it. But jealousy wasn't the only force behind these crimes. For our next case, we go to Italy in the shadow of World War II, where fear of loss led one mother to commit murders so bizarre they sound like urban legend. Leonarda Cianciulli is remembered today as the soap maker of Correggio. And yes, that nickname is as horrific as it sounds. Leonarda was deeply superstitious, a woman convinced that fate itself was out to punish her family. She believed her beloved son, drafted into the war, would die unless she offered a sacrifice, a human sacrifice. In her mind, it wasn't murder. It was protection. She lured women to her home under the guise of fortune-telling, promising bright futures and romantic luck. Once inside, they never left alive. She killed 3 women in total, dismembering their bodies with chilling precision. But what came next secured her place in true crime infamy. She turned their remains into soap and baked their flesh into tea cakes, serving them to unsuspecting neighbors. In her own words during the trial, she said the soap was creamy and the cakes were sweet. This wasn't just killing, it was ritual. It was magic twisted into madness. Her arrest revealed every gruesome detail, and yet even behind bars, Leonarda remained oddly calm, as if the deaths were acts of love, not violence. She died in an asylum decades later, still clinging to her delusion. As shocking as that sounds, Leonarda wasn't alone in using poison as her silent weapon. In Austria, decades later, another widow perfected the deadly art of trust. Elfriede Blauensteiner seemed like the picture of respectability. A caring woman, a loyal friend, someone who offered comfort to the lonely and elderly. But her kindness was measured in banknotes. Each smile hit a ledger, each gesture carried a price. She targeted wealthy acquaintances and even romantic partners, weaving herself into their lives, earning their confidence. Then came the tea, the meals, the drinks, all laced with arsenic. 3 deaths were confirmed, but investigators suspected as many as 10 victims fell to her greed-driven schemes. She gambled away her ill-gotten gains, a queen of hearts playing a game with real lives as stakes. Her trial in the late 90s shocked Austria, exposing the darkness that can lurk behind polite society's facade. Life in prison became her final sentence, and in 2003, death claimed her too, but only after she ensured no fortune passed to anyone but herself. And while these poisoners hid behind the illusion of care, others weaponized their strength. Juana Barraza didn't need arsenic. She had her own hands. Known in Mexico City as La Mataviejitas, the little old lady killer, Juana lived a life shadowed by childhood abuse, a rage she carried into adulthood, channeling it into a spree that left dozens of elderly women dead. Disguising herself as a social worker, she knocked on doors with promises of help, only to strangle her victims with ruthless efficiency. Her tally? At least 42 women, maybe more. The streets of Mexico City trembled with fear. But who would suspect a middle-aged woman, a former wrestler, moving like a ghost among the vulnerable? When she was finally caught in 2006, the nation gasped. Not just at the body count, but at the motive, vengeance against the face of her mother, repeated again and again in those she killed. From Europe to Latin America, from jealousy to greed to rage, these women wrote their stories in blood, but they all shared one truth. They killed because they could. And if you think this is as bad as it gets, you're wrong. Because in the next part, we're going even deeper, into killers who didn't just take lives but shattered every illusion of innocence we hold. So stay with us, because what comes next will make these stories look almost tame by comparison. And if you want to keep uncovering the darkest corners of history, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more true crime that pulls no punches. If the last stories made you question trust, the next ones will make you question humanity itself. We've already seen women who turned love into death and kindness into a trap. But now we're entering territory that feels almost unreal, killers who disguise themselves as saviors, protectors, and even angels, while orchestrating horrors behind closed doors. Picture a midwife in Mexico City during the 1930s, a woman whose hands were supposed to welcome life into the world. Her name was Felicitas Sanchez Aguilan, but the newspapers called her something that still echoes in Mexico's darkest folklore: the human crusher of little angels. She was a nurse, a caregiver, someone entrusted with the most vulnerable. Infants, newborns who never had a chance to speak. To desperate mothers, she seemed like hope in a time of poverty and uncertainty. They paid her to place babies for adoption or care for them temporarily. But Felicitas didn't see children as blessings. She saw them as commodities. Some she sold, others she killed outright, disposing of tiny bodies in the most grotesque ways imaginable. Burning them, dismembering them, dissolving them in acid. The true number of victims? No one knows. Investigators believe as many as 50 babies vanished under her care, each disappearance hidden behind paperwork and false promises. Her motive was money, but greed alone doesn't explain the coldness, the complete absence of empathy in those acts. When authorities finally uncovered her crimes, the horror was so overwhelming that newspapers dubbed her a monster in human skin. She was arrested, but before the courts could deliver justice, Felicitas took her own life in 1941. Some say she couldn't bear judgment. Others think she preferred to control the ending, just as she controlled every life she stole. And in a chilling way, that's the most fitting conclusion, because for killers like her, control was always the ultimate high. But not all women in this gallery of evil worked in secrecy. Some stood in the bright lights of a hospital ward, dressed in white, with stethoscopes draped around their necks, the very image of trust and care. That's where we find Genene Jones, a pediatric nurse in Texas during the late 1970s and early 1980s. To parents, she was the reassuring figure in a room filled with worry. To doctors, she was reliable, competent, always ready in a crisis. And oh, there were crises, so many sudden emergencies, babies who went from stable to critical in the blink of an eye. Nurses rushing, alarms sounding, and then, miraculously, Genene saving the day. Or so it seemed. The truth was monstrous. Genene was creating the crises herself. She injected infants with drugs, heparin, succinylcholine, substances that could stop a heart, collapse lungs, turn a healthy baby into a medical emergency. Then she swooped in to play the hero. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about revenge. It was something darker. A hunger for attention, for the godlike rush of pulling life back from the edge. Except sometimes the babies didn't come back. Sometimes they died. How many? Prosecutors said at least 60. 60 infants who never made it home, sacrificed for one woman's need to feel important. Genene was convicted for just one murder and one attempted murder, a fraction of her suspected total. But the evidence pointed to a killing spree that should make her one of the most prolific female serial killers in American history. She got 99 years. And here's a detail that should make your blood run cold. She almost got out, scheduled for early release after serving a fraction of her sentence, until new charges kept her behind bars. Even now, the thought of what she did, and what she could have done, lingers like a shadow in the halls of justice. From hospitals to quiet suburban homes, our next killer reminds us that evil doesn't always look like a stranger. Sometimes, it wears the face of the teenager you trust to watch your kids. Helen Patricia Moore was just 16 when she became Australia's youngest female serial killer. A babysitter with a secret so disturbing it reads like the plot of a psychological horror film. Between 1979 and 1980, she suffocated 3 children and tried to kill 2 more, all while smiling sweetly at parents who had no idea they were handing their children to a predator. Her motive? Jealousy, resentment. Helen's own baby brother had died of SIDS, and she carried that wound like a festering scar. Some say she wanted others to feel her pain. Others believe she simply craved the sense of control, the sick power of choosing life or death. When she confessed, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. How do you comprehend a teenager calmly admitting to killing toddlers, to pressing the life out of innocence for no reason that makes sense to the human mind? Helen went to prison, served time, and walked free in 1993. Today, no one knows where she is. She could be living next door, smiling at neighbors, carrying groceries up a flight of stairs, and no one would guess the darkness buried in her past. As terrifying as that is, the next name on our list may be the most infamous of them all. Dorothea Puente, the sweet little grandmother with a boarding house in Sacramento, California, during the 1980s. She baked pies, planted flowers, and welcomed the elderly and disabled into her home with open arms. People called her a saint, a woman with a heart for those society forgot. But behind that cozy image, Dorothea was running a house of death. She poisoned her tenants, not out of rage or twisted love, but for something far more mundane: money. After each victim vanished, Dorothea cashed their social security checks, keeping the cash while the bodies piled up in her yard. When police dug through the soft soil of her garden, they found 7 corpses buried beneath the roses, and suspicions that the real number was far higher. Dorothea's face became a national obsession, a grandmotherly figure who turned her home into a graveyard. Even in prison, she insisted she'd done nothing wrong, that she was misunderstood. But the evidence said otherwise. She died behind bars in 2011, leaving behind a legacy of betrayal so profound it still chills true crime followers to this day. Because what's more terrifying than death? Death delivered with a smile, wrapped in a plate of cookies, hidden in a place meant for safety. And as shocking as these stories are, we're still not done. There's a pattern emerging here. Nurses, midwives, babysitters, women who held the power of care and twisted it into something deadly. But the next cases push that theme into even darker territory, where trust wasn't just broken, it was weaponized in ways that make every other story feel almost tame. You'll want to hear what's coming next. And if you haven't already, now's the time to hit that like button. Share this with a friend who thinks they know true crime, and subscribe, because the last part of the story will make you question everything you thought you knew about safety and innocence. If you thought the last stories were the limit of human darkness, brace yourself. The killers we're about to uncover didn't just murder, they mutilated, experimented, and turned death into a ritual. These aren't crimes of passion or simple greed. These are crimes that rewrite the definition of evil. Let's start in England in 1991, inside the sterile halls of Grantham and Kesteven Hospital. Among the hum of machines and the soft cries of sick children walked Beverly Alit, a nurse trusted by parents, adored by staff, and nicknamed the Angel of Death. The title wasn't poetic, it was literal. During a 59-day spree, she turned a children's ward into a killing field, attacking the very patients she was meant to save. 4 children died. 9 more were left with permanent injuries. Her method was silent, almost invisible. Lethal doses of insulin, injected into tiny bodies. But why? Why would someone dedicate their life to caring for children only to destroy them? Investigators believe Beverly suffered from a psychiatric disorder called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. A craving for attention so intense that she created medical emergencies just to bask in the chaos, the drama, the sympathy. She didn't just break the Hippocratic Oath. She shattered the trust of every parent who believed a hospital was the safest place on earth. Sentenced to 13 life terms, Beverly sits in a secure psychiatric facility today. She isn't just a killer. She's a reminder that sometimes, danger doesn't come from strangers in the dark. It comes wearing a nurse's uniform, holding a clipboard, whispering, "Your child is safe with me." But our descent into darkness doesn't stop there. Imagine a world where women didn't just kill, they turned their victims into commodities. That's the story of Leonarda Cianciulli, the infamous soap maker of Correggio. It's Italy, 1939, a nation trembling on the brink of war. Leonarda, a fortune-teller and self-proclaimed protector, believed disaster was coming for her beloved son, who had just been drafted into the army. To save him, she convinced herself that only blood could pay fate's price. And so, she murdered 3 women who trusted her. Women who came to her seeking guidance, hope, and magic. Leonarda didn't just kill them. She dismembered their bodies, boiled their flesh in cauldrons, and used the remains to make soap and tea cakes. Yes, soap, cakes, things she gave to friends and neighbors, as though this was hospitality instead of horror. When she confessed, Leonarda spoke with chilling calmness, describing her acts not as crimes but as sacrifices, a mother's offering to destiny. She died in an asylum decades later, but her story endures because it forces us to confront something most people can't fathom. The idea that love, when twisted, can justify anything, even cannibalistic alchemy. From Europe's macabre kitchens, we move to Mexico, where fear wore a luchadora's mask. Juana Barraza, known as La Mataviejitas, the little old lady killer, was a former professional wrestler who turned her strength into a weapon of vengeance. Between 1998 and 2006, she prowled Mexico City's neighborhoods, targeting elderly women living alone. Her disguise? A social worker, a helper offering government aid. She gained their trust, entered their homes, and then strangled them with her bare hands or a simple scarf. 42 murders confirmed. Possibly more. Juana's motive wasn't money. Though she stole what she could, it was hatred. Deep, festering hatred for her own mother, who had abused her as a child and traded her to a man for beer. Every victim, in Juana's mind, was her mother. Every kill was revenge for a lifetime of humiliation. When police finally caught her, the city exhaled in relief. But the details that emerged painted a picture almost too surreal to believe. A killer balancing 2 lives, one as a wrestling icon and the other as a shadow in the homes of Mexico's most vulnerable. She was sentenced to 759 years in prison, a number as grotesque as her crimes. Today, she remains behind bars, a living ghost of Mexico's darkest chapter. And yet, even after all this, there's a thread that ties every name together. A thread woven from betrayal, obsession, and power. These women weren't the monsters hiding under the bed. They were the babysitter reading bedtime stories, the nurse adjusting in 4-drip, the grandmother offering cookies. They weaponized trust. They turned nurturing, the very thing society expects from women, into the ultimate camouflage for murder. Poison instead of pills. Strangulation instead of an embrace. A boarding house turned into a graveyard. A hospital turned into a morgue. Criminologists call this phenomenon instrumental killing. Murder as a tool for control, for status, for emotional gratification. And the most unsettling truth is far rarer than male serial killing, but that rarity makes it all the more shocking. Female killers don't just break laws, they break archetypes. They destroy the comforting illusion that women can't be predators, that femininity equals safety. They prove that evil wears every face, every gender, every smile. So the next time you hear someone say, "Women don't kill," remember this list. Remember Leonardo's cauldron. Remember Juana's wrestling mask. Remember Beverly Alit standing over a hospital crib with a syringe in her hand. And then ask yourself, how many others slipped through the cracks, their crimes buried beneath layers of trust and charm? We've only scratched the surface, because the history of crime isn't just written in blood. It's written in lies, in illusions, in the quiet laughter of people who know the world underestimates them. And that's what makes these killers so terrifying. They weren't chasing chaos. They were chasing order on their own terms, building worlds where their desires were law. That's the essence of evil. Not madness, not rage, but control. If this story opened your eyes to a reality darker than fiction, hit that like button, share it with someone who thinks they know true crime, and subscribe for more investigations into the minds that history tried to hide. Because we're not done pulling back the curtain, not by a long shot. And trust me, what's coming next will make this look almost tame.